All right, so ready for a deep dive into something pretty heavy.
Oh yeah, lay it on me.
Okay, so we're talking police, we're talking drones, we're talking weapons, like all together.
Oh wow. Okay, yeah. Weaponized drones. I'm listening.
Yeah, lethal weapons like death from above becoming a police tactic.
And this isn't some like sci-fi movie, is it?
Nope, not at all.
Yeah.
We're looking at Connecticut, and they're seriously thinking about becoming the very first state in the U.S. to actually let police use drones with lethal force.
Crazy, right?
First in the U.S.
Uh,
Wow. That's significant.
yeah, it's a big deal. And we're not talking about some far off future either. This is happening now. We actually got an audio clip titled Cops Rig Up Drones to Kill. Pretty intense stuff. So that's what this whole deep dive is about. We'll unpack this proposed bill, look at the arguments for and against it, and try to, wrap our heads around what this could mean for the future of law enforcement. Like, what do you think? Have you thought much about this before? Honestly, not really. It's not something that comes up every day. But it does make you wonder, doesn't it? Like, where's the line?
Exactly. And how will this affect all of us?
Yeah, definitely brings up a lot of questions about like power and safety, what's acceptable, what's too far. It's kind of scary, actually.
It is. And to really understand what's going on in Connecticut, I think we got to look at like the bigger picture first, right? What's the legal landscape across the whole U.S. when it comes to weaponized drones? Like, what are other states doing?
Right, good point. So it's a bit all over the place, honestly. North Dakota is actually the only state that currently allows police to use weaponized drones, but there's a catch. They can only use less lethal weapons.
Less lethal. What does that even mean? Just so I'm clear.
Sure, yeah. So less lethal weapons are things like tear gas, maybe stun guns, rubber bullets, things that are meant to incapacitate, but, not kill.
Okay, got it. So some states allow some form of it, but what about states that are completely against it?
Oh, yeah, there are a few of those. Nevada, North Carolina, Oregon, Vermont, and Wisconsin. They've all totally banned weaponized drones, like for everyone. No exceptions.
And then there are states that specifically target police use, right? Like,
Mm.
I think I read that Maine and Virginia don't allow police to use armed
You
drones.
got it. And then, of course, you've got a bunch of other states that have some rules about drone use in general, but maybe not specifically about weaponized drones. It's a bit of a legal patchwork, honestly, which is why this whole Connecticut thing is even more interesting.
Interesting. I'd say it's more like throwing a wrench into the system
Hmm.
because they want to ban weaponized drones for everyone except the police.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. That exemption for law enforcement is causing a ton of controversy. A lot of civil rights and liberties groups are super worried, and rightfully so. I mean, think about it, the potential for misuse, especially in communities that, already have a tense relationship with the police.
That's a recipe for disaster, isn't it? So, what does the bill actually say? Does it just give the police free rein to use weaponized drones whenever they want?
No, it's not quite that Wild West. The bill does lay out some new rules and training requirements for officers who'd be using these drones. Plus, there's supposed to be oversight from the state police. But even with all that, there's still a huge concern about potential abuse. It's hard to ignore.
Yeah, especially when you think about how 3 police departments in Connecticut, Hartford, Plainfield, and Woodbury have already started using drones even before this bill. Seems like things are moving really fast, maybe too fast.
It's true. And the speed at which this technology is being adopted is a big part of what makes this whole debate so important. Are we really ready for this? Do we even fully grasp the consequences of giving law enforcement this kind of power? I'm not so sure.
I hear you. And one of the main arguments in favor of this bill is that there are some situations, like think active shooter, hostage situations,
Mm.
where a weaponized drone might be the safest, most effective option. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, on the one hand, I can see how a drone with its cameras and sensors and all that could give officers a real advantage in a high-risk situation. Get a better view, maybe even prevent casualties.
Right. Okay. So maybe in extreme cases, there's an argument there.
Yeah.
But then you got to think about mission creep, right? Like, how do we guarantee it won't be used for, less extreme situations? A
Mhm.
slippery slope.
Absolutely. That's a valid concern. And it's something lawmakers really need to like wrestle with because if we're saying, okay, hostage situations, that makes sense, but then what's to stop them from using it for like everyday traffic stops
Yeah.
or even just for surveillance? That's a whole other can of worms.
Yeah. And I bet there are a lot of people who would say that using lethal force, even with a drone, should always be the absolute last resort, not the first option.
For sure. And that's a key part of this whole debate, isn't it? Where do we draw the line?
Exactly. And it's a line we need to draw very carefully. Okay, so we've looked at, like, the laws and stuff and even some of the arguments for this Connecticut bill. But uh, what about the other side? Why are people so against it?
Right. I mean, there's a lot of pushback from like civil rights groups, legal experts, even some lawmakers, and they're all raising some pretty serious questions about, you know, what could go wrong? Like, what happens if this technology gets misused? And how will this impact communities that are already, struggling with police relations?
Yeah, that's a huge concern. Like, I remember reading this quote from Scott Esdale. He's the president of the Connecticut NAACP. And he said, "We've got huge concerns that they would use this new technology to abuse our communities."
Wow. Yeah, that's a pretty powerful statement.
It is. So I'm curious, how could this technology actually be harmful to those communities?
Well, you got to remember, we're not talking about drones in isolation,
Right.
right? We're talking about drones being used by the police, by a system that already has issues with, bias and accountability.
So it's not just the technology itself, it's the context.
Exactly. And the worry is that these weaponized drones could become like just another tool for excessive force, racial profiling, all that,
Mhm.
especially in communities that, already don't trust the police.
And yeah, those concerns aren't coming out of thin air. We've seen how things like facial recognition software have been used in ways that, like, disproportionately harm those same communities.
Absolutely. There's definitely a pattern here. And when you start talking about lethal force, the stakes get even higher. It's not just about surveillance anymore. It's about life and death.
And that brings us to another big worry: escalation of force. If a police officer has a drone with a weapon, is it more likely they'll actually use it compared to, if they were face to face?
That's a great question. I mean, it's hard to say for sure, but you got to think. There's a psychological distance when you're using a drone. You're not right there in the moment facing the person. So maybe it's easier to like pull the trigger.
It's almost like they're playing a video game.
Yeah, kind of. And that detachment can be dangerous, because even with the best training, human judgment can be flawed, especially in a stressful situation.
It makes me think about accountability too. Like, if a drone fires a weapon, who's really responsible? The officer or
Yeah.
the police department? The company that made the drone?
Right. That's a whole legal and ethical mess that honestly hasn't really been sorted out yet. But it needs to be before we start putting these things in the sky. Because what happens if there's like an innocent bystander? Or if the drone is used in a way that violates someone's rights, who's going to answer for that?
Yeah, and I remember the ACLU of Connecticut, the executive director, David McGuire, he said something like, "It's outrageous that this is even being considered. Lethal force takes this to a whole other level of concern."
They've been really vocal against this. And their point is we need to have a bigger conversation as a society before we just like unleash this technology.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about the potential problems,
Hmm.
but the bill does have some other stuff in it, right? Not all about weaponized drones. Some of it actually seems like maybe good steps in the right direction.
Yeah, you're right. There are some parts that try to like regulate drone use in general, even for drones without weapons. For example, they want police to get a warrant before using a drone for surveillance, unless it's, an emergency or they have consent.
So trying to find a balance between, like, using this new technology but still protecting people's privacy.
Exactly. But of course, the big question is, will these safeguards really work? Like, what counts as an emergency? Will those exceptions be abused?
And how do you actually make sure the police are following the rules?
Right. Enforcement is key. I mean, the bill does say that police have to, like, report how they're using drones, why they use them, and all that. So that's a start.
It makes me think about body cameras. There was so much hope that they, hold police accountable, reduce misconduct, but it's been more complicated than that.
It's a good comparison. Technology isn't a magic solution, It's a tool, and it can be used for good or bad. Depends on the people using it, the rules, the whole system.
Earlier you said that some lawmakers who actually voted for the bill still have concerns. What are they worried about?
Even those who generally agree with, giving police more power, they're still hesitant about moving too fast with this.
Yeah.
Some of them are saying, look, we need more research, more data, more discussion before we make such a huge decision.
It's not a simple issue, is it?
Not at all. There are so many layers to this: legal, ethical, practical. And I think that's reflected in how much debate there's been. Even those who voted to move the bill forward admit that it's, a tough call.
So even though it passed through the Judiciary Committee, it still has a long way to go before it's a done deal. What happens next?
Now it goes to the House floor. And that's where things could get really interesting. You'll probably see more amendments, more people speaking out on both sides, and maybe some heated arguments between lawmakers who, have completely different views.
So there's still a chance for people to make their voices heard.
Absolutely. Now's the time for people to contact their representatives, get involved, let them know what they think.
Because at the end of the day, this isn't just about Connecticut, is it?
Nope. This feels like the beginning of a much bigger national conversation about the future of policing, about technology, about what kind of society we want to live in.
And that's where our listeners come in. This isn't some abstract debate. These are decisions being made that could actually affect their lives.
Exactly. So the question we want to leave you with is this. If this technology does become a reality, like everywhere, what would you want to see put in place to make sure it's used responsibly?
Think about it. Do we need stricter rules? More oversight? More transparency? What would make you feel safe? It's a lot to think about. But like you said, it's not just about Connecticut. This whole thing, it feels like just the start of a much bigger conversation about policing, technology, our future.
Definitely. And that's why it's so important for people to, stay informed, get involved. Don't just sit back and assume someone else will handle it. This affects all of us.
For sure.
Yeah.
So, what can our listeners actually do? Where can they, learn more, get involved in this whole debate?
Well, first off, I'd say take a look at what's happening in their own communities. Like, what are their local or state laws regarding drones? Attend those city council meetings, get in touch with their representatives, make their voices heard.
And if someone wants to, learn more about the national conversation, there are tons of resources. Like the ACLU has been doing a lot of work on this, and there are other civil liberties groups too. And even just, reading articles from different sources, getting different perspectives.
Yeah, do your own research, form your own opinions. The more people who are engaged in this, the better.
It's easy to get caught up in the fear and the what ifs with this whole weaponized drone thing.
Yeah.
But we got to think constructively too, right? Like, what could the benefits be?
Mm-hmm.
And what are the risks? And how do we, minimize those risks? What are the safeguards we need?
That's the right approach. It's not just about saying yes or no to weaponized drones. It's about having a real conversation, thinking it through. How can we use this technology in a way that, makes sense, that actually benefits society, protects people, and, aligns with our values?
It's a challenge that's going to take all of us working together.
Yeah.
Lawmakers, the police, tech people, everyday citizens, we all have a role to play.
Totally agree. What we decide now will have a huge impact down the road. So let's make sure we're going into this with our eyes wide open.
Absolutely. Well said. So that wraps up our deep dive into the world of weaponized drones. It's complex, it's constantly changing, and honestly, it's a bit unsettling.
But hopefully this conversation has, given you some food for thought, encouraged you to keep learning, and, stay engaged with this issue. It's important.
Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Keep those minds curious, folks.